I'm going to share some of my experiences with the internet and technology, and of TikTok and algorithms. Now, whether TikTok is banned or not, I think that my time on that app is over. I won't be posting any more videos on there or generally just using it. I feel that I got everything out of it that I could. I ended up with a decent score on that app. Nothing crazy, but for me it was pretty high. The way I would describe TikTok is a citadel. It's bustling with activity 24/7 in an endless fair. It's constantly buzzing and in your face. The content style of TikTok is that of vendors and mall kiosks, accosting anyone they can with hooks and anything to draw people into their platform. It was worth experiencing for the time, but my style of content is not really conducive to that type of ecosystem. I don't like being on the receiving end nor rushing to keep up with that hub of activity. And it certainly is a cultural hub. YouTube to me is like a vast plains. There are settlements and silk roads and very cultivated areas, but there's also space to stake a claim in the outskirts, in the less traveled wastelands. My channel is like a grotto, and my videos are cave paintings that anyone can visit if they happen to stumble upon it. I used to try to make my thumbnails resemble charcoal cave paintings, but sort of stopped after a time. I think people were put off by it, so it kind of just fell out of fashion. Maybe I'll start it up again. YouTube has spaces that are very much hubs of activity and a similar pacing to TikTok, but the barren steppe is where I prefer. So after spending time in the citadel, I return to my cave. I don't use Instagram much, but that app feels kind of like a cafe lounge or lobby area of a mega corporate building, and so it's a bit too formal or business oriented. It lacks the open, desolate spaces that I prefer. In general, my sensory experiences have synesthetized to build these worlds, to relate things to a metaphorical microcosm, whether it is internet spaces or music, books, TV, food, or just experiencing different locations. Everything sort of combines to coat my senses or perception in a particular shade or texture. The reason I bring this up as an example is because we so often invalidate sensory experience that falls outside the conditioned five. In alchemy, there is this concept called the Torment of the metals. It's a necessary step in the alchemical work that sees the personified metals having to go through the transformations, these trials, in order to be mixed and form new elements. There is an aversion to any sort of torment of the senses, the ability to transmute experience and information in us. We have malnourished phoenix systems. But there are instances where this seeps through the cracks. The topic of algorithms is often personified, animated, and given agency. Yet even this is mainly said in a joking manner, not actually believing their own perspective, but no less acknowledging the uncanniness of synchronicity in the algorithm. I've described the innervation of culture, trends, virality, shifts, and changes as tides and waves. The natural ebb and flow of society and communities, whether in a county or networked through the internet. All this is true regardless of the technology, but as it is, we have these devices, phones and computers, which are miniature neolithic temples. They function in a lot of the same ways, just with an added display interface. They are rocks, crystals, and metals with lightning running through them. Those are the basic elements. Indeed, what we call organic life is rather just water, rocks, and lightning. The range of electromagnetism, the frequencies, and signals are all the same. In other words, we didn't invent Wi-Fi or radio waves. We simply took the right assortment of crystals and metals and focused these signals, sending them to servers, receivers, transmitters, building power lines and cables and satellites. Neolithic temples were just that. These megalith structures were arrangements of rocks containing crystals, many of the same ones used in phones such as quartz. These stone sites amplified, distorted, moved, charged, and discharged energy in various ways, depending on the type of temple and material and its location. They were batteries in some sense, vortex generators and connectors, moving subtle amounts of energy to many different uses, bouncing audio signals, producing electrical charges, and so on. They took advantage of Leylines and Telluric currents, which are geomagnetic and electromagnetic waves that naturally vibrate around, in, and through the Earth, affected by the resonance of the Earth and the movement of stars, planets, and the sun and moon, as well as the ecosystem and organic life. So it naturally shifts and flows. With the internet, we have made similar highways of certain currents, specific ranges of frequency that we use to send and receive information. It's information that can already travel through currents. I think this is an experience most, if not anyone, has had, which is to have an awareness of a message or notification seconds or even hours before it arrives to your phone. It is not precognition, but the same factors that bridged connections inspiring the message to be sent in the first place is also connecting in your awareness. In other words, it's multiple people thinking the same line of thought. Put more simply, as these natural currents and electromagnetic fields shift and wave, they are going to form connections between neurons in your body and transmit information to your cells and the crystal particles in us. Because remember, we have those same kinds of elements in us. Our DNA is a piezoelectric crystal, similar to quartz, used both in phones and in Neolithic temples, and various other materials and organs capable of sensory reception and processing. But again, our filtering of only using 5 senses often stops us from cultivating or validating these experiences as possible or real. There is almost an unspoken rule that you have to dismiss feelings or find a way to logically conclude that you used one of your 5 senses to determine information about something. It's a level of cognitive dissonance and a complete disregard for the sheer complexity of our bodies and the unseen side of the electromagnetic spectrum. You could even say it is almost foolish to have no ability whatsoever to process different frequency signals outside of what is visible to our photoreceptors. Everything's evolving alongside this range of electromagnetism. And melanin absorbs that entire range of electromagnetism. Our skin can feel beyond the tactile sense. But before anything even reaches the skin or any other sensory organ, we have an electromagnetic field surrounding our bodies produced by the heart. Any information, whether light particles, sound waves, or electromagnetic frequencies, is first going to be met with the field surrounding us. The heart, therefore, is our first interaction with the external, and it's a receiver of sensory information. It can feel disturbances, eyes, intent. It can be magnetized or drawn to things, sense danger, form connections, and attune to anything regardless of distance. It's capable of many of the same wireless features we use phones for. But on the subject of phones and the internet, when the waves shift, connections form, perhaps old memories, thinking about something that you forgot, remembering a dream or an experience. You might have heard a ghost train as a child, despite not living near any train tracks, and suddenly one day remembering you used to hear that, and then seeing on your algorithm someone talking about that same experience. The connection was formed naturally with the conflux of shifting energy, something that in a number of people who all had that experience suddenly remembered. The same connections were bridged. Then, because that energy happens to line up with the artificial ley lines, the algorithm synchronizes, and all these people, without needing to search up the phenomena, find many others with the same experience. You could think of many instances like that outside of the internet, but when it happens in the internet, when the artificial ley lines we've created for Wi-Fi and the internet are combined in the natural shifting currents, we tend to feel spied on, that the algorithm is specifically or extra attuned People can also influence their algorithm through thoughts alone. As the energy is emitted by the brain to think, it will transmit and ride those artificial ley lines or even the Earth's fields. Spending large amounts of time on the internet, scrolling and processing videos, that alone can be draining as the electrical activity is centered in the brain, but it's also highly dissociating. Plugging into the ley lines, whether artificial or natural, is to be tapping into this energy, this mana. In order to support that, the gut has to work extra hard to supply the brain with resources and neurotransmitters and hormones. People will often speak of things like, for TikTok or other social media apps, as being addictive or providing these dopamine fixations, and generally cite it as disrupting the brain or mind. But what's actually happening is the toll is being taken on the gut. Unplugging and disconnecting from these apps and social media is primarily going to be felt in the gut, as it has a chance to relax and replenish and repair, something that it has trouble doing when exposed to the rush of the internet, the connection of all that electrical and electromagnetic frequencies. And that is just another in a long list of sensory experiences we ignore and don't validate because they are not backed by the scientists who themselves operate with limited and conditioned perceptions. There is no torment of the senses. One of the ultimate misconceptions is the false equivalence that only the most concentrated and powerful signals do anything. For our technology, it is true that they require huge power sources and very attuned frequencies. But the more subtle magnetism of natural currents and objects, and even our hearts or our thoughts, of trees and rocks and lakes and mountains and storms and microbes, they are all alive like the tides. Our neurons and cells and DNA are microscopic. They react to those subtle confluences. It is what they have developed to be sensitive to. It's what they've evolved around. The nexus points and ley lines and these currents, and we have barely even fathomed the full ramifications of being bathed in these higher concentrations of specific frequencies, all because we have that out of sight, out of mind mentality. The algorithm can be calibrated, you can tap into it. Just know that a period of rest and grounding to unplug and bring the electrical state out of the brain is necessary from burning out or obsessing. People like to ride those waves because they feel a sense of community or belonging, or they seek moments of fame or popularity, or simply to get a message out, and TikTok in particular has proven very good at that. And that is alluring to many people. We are in a time of such abstract and mystic phenomena, and we not only take that for granted, we fail to sense properly and forget to acknowledge the consequences of being so plugged in to these networks, especially when most of the time it is used to siphon our time, our money, to manipulate ideologies, as propaganda, as proselytizing, fear-mongering, to argue and pit everyone against each other. Using the internet exposes you. Your protective field is disrupted in order to tap in. Being in that high electrical state and plugging into the artificial ley lines. And most of what is sent to you is shock and awe and violence and ethical or moral dilemmas to make you feel bad, to put guilt and injunctions on you for their own gain. It dysregulates your nervous system. That is the risk you take plugging into the ley lines. So with all that being said, closing off to a lot of extra currents can be therapeutic. It can be worth the experience, traversing through the currents, seeing the waves, and learning of human nature and electromagnetism in different spaces. But I, for one, like to have the quieter open areas, away from everything. And even though it is a digital space, it is made up of all the same things the rest of reality is, just in different doses. A different torment of the elements. Thanks for watching this cave painting in your pocket Neolithic temple.